Welcome to Meet the Candidates 2022, a voter education program brought to you by the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce. My name is Tim Zunker, and I'm the president with the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Our hope is that these candidate interviews and profiles will help you, the voter, understand your choices when it comes to the 2022 elections. We ask voters to arm themselves with information necessary to make educated choices and to make casting your vote a priority. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org to find out more information about the upcoming election. And now I'd like to introduce Eric Pratt, who's running for re-election for Minnesota Senate. Eric, thank you for joining us today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity. Hi, my name is Eric Pratt, and I've been representing you in the Minnesota Senate for the last 3 terms. For those of you that don't know me, I grew up in the area. I grew up in Prior Lake. My mom was a teacher here in Shakopee. The running joke is that there's still a lot of people that know me as Mrs. Pratt's son versus a senator. I have a degree in economics from the University of Colorado and a master's in finance from the University of St. Thomas. I spent 30 years in banking and financial services, where I was a senior leader and executive at Target Corporation and U.S. Bank. I currently chair the Jobs and Economic Growth Committee. One of the things that we try to do in that committee is make sure that every Minnesotan has a chance to participate in the economy. So we're trying to make Minnesota a great place to invest for entrepreneurs. We want to balance the rights and responsibilities of both employers and employees. And we want to remove the barriers of employment, because one of the things we want to do is get more Minnesotans back to work. Over the last 2 years in that job, I've spent most of my time combating the impact that COVID had on our economy. I put forth legislation to create some grant and loan programs to help small business survive the stay-at-home orders, and then also this last session led an effort to pay off the debt that we owed to the federal government and stop tax increases on small businesses due to the unemployment trust fund. And I want to keep, I'm running for re-election to keep fighting for Scott County families and Scott County businesses.
Great. Thank you, Eric. If you could write, sign, and pass 3 laws today, what would they be and why?
Well, I think the first law I'd want to do is a tax relief bill. We are when we ended the session, we had a $9 billion surplus. And depending on the economy, we're expected to come back to a $10 or $12 billion surplus next session. And we don't have an underspending problem. We have an overtaxing problem. And we're one of just a few states that continues to tax Social Security benefits. So, one of the things that I'm trying to do is help families survive the rising cost of inflation. And the tax bill that a lot of families are facing is a big part of that. The second thing is, having served on a local school board, I want to focus on our kids and predominantly on literacy. We know that when a kid, the biggest thing that determines a student's success is whether or not they can read at grade level by 3rd grade. And so I've been supporting efforts to increase literacy in schools, working with Senator Chamberlain on a program that was designed for kids with dyslexia, but have been proven to help all kids with their literacy and make sure that we really focus on the student. And maybe just a little parochial, I'd like to pass a bill that would reinforce the riverbank here in Shakopee to protect a sewer line from being compromised, and then also fix the intersection along 169. That's become a very dangerous intersection. We've had a number of injuries and due to crashes, and then also really to help the commerce here in Scott County. So those would be the 3 bills I'd take on first.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Coming out of the pandemic, businesses are being affected by issues including workforce shortages. What policies would you support in the next legislative session to help alleviate this issue?
The number one thing I hear from business owners is that they're having a hard time finding qualified candidates. And we're still 100,000 people short in the workforce from where we started back in early 2020. But getting back to the qualifications, more and more businesses are taking on that responsibility to train their employees. But one of the things we also do is through the unemployment tax that we charge, there's a small portion that goes to the Workforce Development Fund. And we help nonprofits and some different entities take on some of those workforce development skills training programs. And what I'd like to do is maybe allow our businesses that are doing that training to get reimbursed for some of that expense. We have a local business, Caltex Electric, and they are taking kids straight out of high school and giving them the training needed in order to take a journeyman's license within 4 years. And they're taking on all that expense. They're developing that workforce, and so we should be supporting those types of efforts. And then I think we need to bring back the angel tax credit. When we go into a recession or come out of recession, we see a flurry of entrepreneurship. And Minnesota is behind other states in their angel tax credits, bringing capital to Minnesota to help with seed money for these small businesses. So I'd like to be able to do that as well.
Great. Thank you, Eric. According to the Office of Minnesota Budget and Management, the general fund budgetary balance for fiscal year 2022-2023 is projected to be over $7 billion. In fiscal year 2024-2025 is projected to be over $12 billion. What policies would you propose or support in the next legislative session considering these budget surplus projections?
Well, first of all, as I said, we have an overtaxing problem, and so I would like to pass the Senate version of the tax bill. That really did two main things. One, it eliminated the tax on Social Security benefits. Minnesota is one of only 12 states that taxes seniors on money that they receive through Social Security. And in a way, that money is being double taxed. It's taxed when they earned it, and then it's taxed when they get it back. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we wanted to pass a bill that gives every Minnesota family a tax cut. On the average family in Scott County would receive a little over $1,000 year after year in lower taxes, and that's money that would be available to help combat the rising cost of living that we're seeing through the record inflation numbers. So that's the first thing I'd want to. The main thing I'd want to do when we get back into session and really attack the surplus.
Great. Thank you, Eric. According to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, there were roughly 395 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents in 2021 in the 7-county metro region, which is a 24% increase over 2020 levels. What are the best solutions to lower the crime rate not only in the 7-county metro, but throughout Minnesota?
Well, this is one of the questions that I hear at the doors most often. What are we doing to make our community safer? The defund the police movement really had a devastating impact on our law enforcement community. And in fact, we're seeing fewer young people enter the profession. Last year, the Senate proposed, and I supported, efforts to help with both recruiting and retaining experienced law enforcement officers so that we can keep our local law enforcement efforts where they're at. And I got to say, our local police departments do a fantastic job of partnering within the community. And I think, and I've at the Capitol, I've talked about how I think Scott County policing is a model for what we can do statewide. I also led an effort to increase the funding for probation services. One of the problems that we see is this revolving door of crime, but if we can bolster our probation services that when people get out of prison, or if they're put on probation instead of being incarcerated, that we do the necessary follow-up to keep them out of trouble. And then finally, I think we need to help communities be able to afford good policing, and we put forward an effort to increase the use of body cameras, particularly for smaller communities that are having a hard time affording that technology.
Great. Thank you, Eric. What would your plan be to help with healthcare costs for businesses and families?
This is one of the things that the Senate has been pushing and we've passed is a program called reinsurance. Prior to the passage of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, Minnesota had what was called MCHA, and that helped lower the premiums for people with pre-existing and chronic conditions. Well, when the Affordable Care Act passed, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. And so what we've been doing is helping out with reinsurance to help cover the cost for those people, so that we continue to support and make healthcare more affordable for people with those pre-existing and chronic conditions. I would also like to see us cut the red tape on providing healthcare. We're finding tremendous benefits from telemedicine, particularly in rural Minnesota. And then we need to look at investing in mental health. We've got people who are suffering from mental health episodes in expensive emergency room beds. And so creating the facilities and for these people to be so that we can free up hospital beds and emergency room beds for really emergencies, other emergencies is I think critical in helping to bring down healthcare costs overall.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Do you support passage of sports betting in Minnesota? If so, what would be the best way to implement?
Oh, I do support sports betting, and I think it ought to be both at the casinos and at the track. Look, let's face it, we already have sports betting here in Scott County at Canterbury Park. And I think this would be just a perfect addition for both the existing casinos and the tracks to bring in additional revenue and keep our local people from driving down to Iowa or over to Wisconsin to make these bets. They're happening. We should be open to doing that, especially when you have an economy here in Scott County that relies heavily on tourism.
Great, thank you. Now I'd like to give you the opportunity to give your closing statement and message to the voters.
Well, thank you, Tim, and I want to thank the Chamber for this opportunity to do this video and talk directly to the voters. At this time, I think Scott County really needs proven leadership at the state capitol. As I mentioned, I grew up here, I raised my family here, and I've been fighting for Scott County families for a long time. And I want to continue to fight for you up at the state capitol in the Minnesota Senate, and I hope I can earn your vote on November 8th.
Great, thank you, Eric. As a reminder, the views expressed in these interviews are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber is sponsoring these events as a service to the community and has gone to great lengths to ensure the objectivity. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the citizens and voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. The Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau extends a sincere thank you to the candidates. Thank you again, Eric. We appreciate your time and service to our community by running for office. You're performing an important service to us all. Again, thank you for joining us for this edition of Meet the Candidates 2022. Please join us September 29th at River Valley Church for our candidate forum. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org for more information. Thank you. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.